If it's the Electra, it would suggest that the Nikamororo hypothesis could be true, that Earhart and Noonan didn't crash at sea, but rather they landed the aircraft possibly on the reef of that island and were marooned there.
Chilling discovery at 16,000 feet changes the history of aviation forever and leaves researchers stunned. Deep-sea explorers found what appears to be a twin-tail aircraft resting in the crushing pressure of the deep sea. This location fits a theory that everyone ignored for a very long time. What most people do not realize is that a tiny mistake by her navigator could have moved her 60 miles away from her target. Yeah, about that, the search zone was exactly where the drone found the shape. This is the end of the mystery. Cold truth 3 miles down. Finding the plane of Amelia Earhart has been the greatest mystery in the history of flight for nearly 9 decades. For 88 years, people have wondered what happened to the most famous woman in the world. In January of 2024, a team of deep-sea explorers from a company called Deep Sea Vision made an announcement that stopped the world. They believe they found her plane resting on the floor of the Pacific Ocean. This was not a lucky guess or a random find. Tony Romeo, who is a former intelligence officer for the United States Air Force, sold his commercial real estate properties to fund this hunt. He put $11 million on the line because he believed in a theory that others missed. His team used a machine called the Hugin 6000. This is a torpedo-shaped drone that is 22 feet long and travels deep underwater without a pilot. It uses the best sonar technology on the planet to scan the bottom of the ocean. For about 100 days, this drone moved back and forth over a massive area of 5,200 square miles. That is about the size of the state of Connecticut. They were searching in a specific spot near Howland Island. This is a tiny piece of land in the middle of nowhere. Most searchers thought she crashed somewhere else, but Tony Romeo followed something called the dateline theory. Basically, this theory says her navigator made a tiny mistake that changed everything. Fred Noonan was the man responsible for finding their way. He used the stars and X-rated to figure out where they were. During their flight of 18 hours, they crossed the international dateline. The theory suggests that Noonan was so tired that he forgot to turn his calendar back one day. This sounds like a small thing, but in navigation, it is huge. One day off on the calendar would throw their math off by 60 miles. They would be looking for the island in the wrong place while running out of gas. This is a key detail that explains why they vanished. The drone was searching right in that 60-mile wide error zone. When the team looked at the data, they saw a blurry, grainy shape sitting on the seafloor at 16,000 feet. The pressure at that depth is about 8,000 pounds per square inch. That is enough to crush almost anything. But the sonar image showed something with 2 vertical tails. That is a very specific feature of the Lockheed 10E Electra that Amelia was flying. It looked like the wings were still attached and the body was in one piece. This means she probably did not crash hard. She likely ran out of fuel and landed the plane on top of the water. The plane would have floated for maybe 10 minutes before the heavy engines pulled it down. It would have been a long, dark trip to the bottom. The discovery is so deep that nobody could have seen it with cameras in the 1930s. Even today, it takes a $9 million robot just to get a blurry picture. This is hands down the most promising lead since the day she disappeared. Darkness beneath the waves hides the final moments of a legendary pilot. Amelia Earhart was not just a pilot, she was a global superstar in the 1930s. To understand why finding her plane is such a big deal, you have to realize how much she meant to people. She was the first woman to fly alone across the Atlantic Ocean in 1932. That made her an icon of courage. But she wanted more. She wanted to be the first person to fly around the world at the widest part, which is the equator. This was a trip of 29,000 miles. The technology they had back then was very basic compared to what we have today. There was no satellite navigation or emergency buttons. They had to use a clock and the stars to know where they were. Her plane was a Lockheed 10E Electra, which she called her flying laboratory. She had most of the seats taken out so she could fit huge gas tanks inside. This allowed the plane to stay in the air for over 20 hours. On July 2, 1937, she and Fred Noonan took off from New Guinea. They were headed for Howland Island, which is a tiny speck of coral only 2 miles long. It is like trying to find a needle in a haystack while flying over thousands of miles of blue water. The United States Coast Guard had a ship called the Itasca waiting there. The ship was supposed to send out radio signals so Amelia could find them. But there were massive problems with the radio. They could hear her, but she could not hear them. At 7:42 in the morning, her voice came over the radio. She sounded worried. She said they were over the area but could not see the island. She also said the gas was running low. The crew on the ship tried to make smoke to help her see them, but the clouds were too thick. At 8:43, she sent her last message. She gave a line of position, and then there was nothing but static. The most famous woman in the world had vanished into thin air. The United States government spent $4 million looking for her. They used 66 planes and 9 ships, including a battleship and an aircraft carrier. They searched 250,000 square miles but found nothing. No oil, no floating bags, and no plane. It was as if the ocean had just swallowed them whole. Many rumors are still on the air about what happened after that final call. Hidden secrets of the South. Because the search found nothing, people started making up wild stories. One of the biggest theories was that she was a spy for the government and was captured by the Japanese. Another popular idea was the castaway theory. This theory says she did not crash at sea, but landed on a different island. There is a group called Tihar that spent years looking at an island called Nicomaroro. It is about 400 miles south of where she was supposed to go. They believe she saw this island and landed on the flat coral reef when the tide was low. For decades, this was the story everyone loved because it meant she survived for a while. They found some very interesting things on that island. They found pieces of a woman's shoe from the 1930s. They found a zipper and a small glass jar. When scientists looked at the jar, they realized it was for a brand of freckle cream. Amelia Earhart famously hated her freckles and used that exact kind of cream. This was a huge wow factor for the castaway theory. In 1940, a British officer on the island even found 13 human bones. He thought they belonged to a short man. But years later, researchers looked at the measurements again with modern computers. They said the bones actually matched a woman of Amelia's height and race. This made people think she died as a castaway after living on the island for weeks or months. But here is the catch. None of that evidence actually proved it was her. The freckle cream was a common brand. The shoe could have belonged to anyone. And the bones disappeared years ago, so they could never be tested for DNA. The biggest problem with the island theory was the plane. If she landed on the reef, the plane should still be there or nearby. They searched the water around the island with sonar many times and found nothing. It was all just pieces of trash that might have belonged to her, but it was not the plane. The search for the island survival story was exciting, but it led people away from the truth. Tony Romeo's new discovery near Howland Island suggests that all those years on the island were spent looking in the completely wrong place. The ocean has a way of keeping secrets until the right technology arrives. The sonar image from the deep-sea drone tells a much more terrifying story than the island theory. If the image is the Electra, it means there was no survival. There was no island life or being captured. The truth is much faster and much more lonely. This is where it gets chilling. Imagine being in that cockpit as the sun comes up. You are looking for a tiny island, and the fuel needles are touching zero. You realize the math was wrong, and you are lost over the deep ocean. The water in that area is 3 miles deep. In 1937, searching at that depth was impossible. The United States Navy was only looking for things floating on the top. They did not have the tools to see the bottom. Tony Romeo's drone found the shape 16,000 feet down. This depth is incredible. For comparison, the Titanic is about 12,500 feet deep. The Electra is resting nearly 4,000 feet deeper than the most famous shipwreck in the world. The sonar image shows the plane is intact. This is a very important detail. It means the plane did not hit the water and break into pieces. If it had exploded or hit hard, there would be a huge debris field. Instead, it looks like a whole aircraft. This suggests Amelia did exactly what she was trained to do. She probably flew the plane as slowly as possible and touched it down on the waves. This is called ditching. It is a very dangerous move, but she was one of the best pilots ever. Once the plane hit the water, it would have stayed afloat for a few minutes. The empty fuel tanks in the wings would act like floats, but the engines were very heavy. Within 10 minutes, the nose would have dipped under and the ocean would have pulled the plane down. The sonar image sitting on the seabed suggests they might have still been inside. If they could not get the hatch open, or if they were hurt from the landing, they would have gone down with the plane. It would have taken a long time to fall 3 miles. They would have moved from the bright surface water down into the twilight where the light fades away. Eventually, they would reach the midnight zone where it is pitch black and freezing cold. The plane would finally land on the soft silt of the ocean floor, where it has stayed for 88 years. This is the horrifying reality of the discovery. It is not a story of a castaway, it is a story of a silent, deep grave. One tiny error turned a world record attempt into a permanent underwater monument. Abyssal silence claims the past. The team from Deep Sea Vision is already making plans to go back. They need to use high-resolution cameras and lights to see the plane with their own eyes. Until they get a clear photo of the serial number on the wing, it is still just a very strong possibility. But the sonar image is so close to the shape of her plane that many experts are excited. If this is confirmed, it will be the end of the greatest mystery in aviation history. We will finally know that she did not vanish into another dimension or become a prisoner. She simply made a mistake that any tired human could make and paid the ultimate price for it. Looking at the sonar, you can see the pride of the 1930s aviation sitting in the mud. It is a reminder that even the most famous and talented people can be defeated by the vastness of the Pacific Ocean. The ocean is millions of square miles of empty space, and she was just one person in a small metal bird. When they return with cameras, they might see the cockpit where she sat. They might see the tools Fred Noonan used. It will be like opening a time capsule from 1937, but it will also be a sad moment. It confirms that her journey ended in the dark, far away from the land she was trying to reach. The world has waited a long time for this answer. We are closer than ever to bringing the story of Amelia Earhart to a close. The truth is no longer a mystery, it is a coordinate on a map 3 miles down. Does this discovery finally bring peace to the mystery, or do you believe she survived on an island? Let us know what you think. Make sure to like and subscribe for more.